I still remember the exact sound the gavel made when the judge brought it down. My name is Renee Caldwell. I'm 38 years old. I'm a senior accountant at a logistics firm in Atlanta, Georgia. And on a Wednesday morning in late February, I sat in a courtroom in DeKalb County and watched the man I had loved for 14 years. The man who once wrapped a red bow around an exercise bike and called it devotion, sit across from me with his hands shaking so bad he couldn't hold his own paperwork. He had taken $85,000 from our children's college fund. Every single dollar I had quietly saved over 8 years while he was spending it on her. And the most painful part, it all started with that bike. That beautiful, expensive, thoughtful bike that I truly believed was the first time in years he had really seen me. I was so wrong. But before I tell you how it ended, let me take you back to a Tuesday morning in March when everything still looked fine from the outside. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. If this story hits close to home, hit that subscribe button and stay with me, because trust me, you are going to want to hear every single second of this. Back to that Tuesday morning. The coffee was hot, the kids were loud, and my husband was standing in the living room with the biggest smile I'd seen on his face in 2 years. I had no idea that the woman smiling back at me through that screen every single morning was the reason my marriage was already over. Let me tell you who I was before all of this. I am Renee Caldwell, senior accountant at Meridian Logistics, a mid-size freight company off Peachtree Road in Midtown Atlanta. I have been doing this work for 11 years. I know balance sheets the way some people know scripture, every line, every discrepancy, every number that doesn't quite sit right. My supervisor, Donna, used to joke that I could smell a misaligned entry from across the building. She wasn't entirely wrong. I grew up in College Park, the second of 3 daughters raised by a mother who worked double shifts at Grady Memorial and still found time to check our homework every single night. She taught me that you don't wait for someone to hand you stability. You build it yourself, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. I took that lesson and I ran with it. By the time I was 32, I had a house, a real one. A 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom brick home on Wisteria Lane in Decatur, about 14 miles east of downtown, 2,100 square feet, a backyard with a magnolia tree that dropped petals every spring like it was showing off. I loved that house more than I could explain to anyone who hadn't spent years dreaming about having something solid and permanent, and yours. I had 2 kids I would walk through fire for. Devin, 11 years old, obsessed with Legos and anything that involved taking apart machines to see how they worked. Camille, 9, sharp as a tack, already correcting my grammar at the dinner table. Those 2 were and still are the best things I have ever done with my life. No contest. And I had Damon Lamar Caldwell, 42 years old, construction supervisor for a mid-size contracting company based out of Stone Mountain. 6 feet, even broad shoulders, the kind of laugh that filled up a room and made strangers turn around to see where it came from. We met at a cookout in East Point, mutual friends, nothing dramatic, just 2 people who kept gravitating toward the same corner of the yard and eventually stopped pretending it was a coincidence. We dated for 2 years. Got married on a Saturday in October at a small venue in Lithonia with 62 guests and a DJ who played way too much 90s slow jams and not nearly enough of anything else. It was imperfect and warm and ours. I was 26. I thought I had figured out the hard part. For a long time, things were genuinely good. Damon was funny. He was present. He coached Devin's Saturday morning flag football clinic for 2 seasons, even though he worked long hours all week. He remembered how I took my coffee light with 1 sugar, and there were stretches of time where he'd have a cup waiting on the counter before I even made it downstairs. Small things. The kind of small things that add up into a life you trust. But somewhere around year 9 or 10, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not in any way I could point to and name. It was more like a slow leak, the kind you don't notice until the tire is already flat. He started coming home quieter. The conversations got shorter. He stopped asking about my day the way he used to, and when I asked about his, I got 1-word answers and a look at his phone. I told myself it was work stress. I told myself it was the age, the routine, the weight of a long marriage settling in. I told myself a lot of things. Then came the Tuesday morning in early March that changed everything. I was in the kitchen making lunches for Devin and Camille when I heard Damon call my name from the living room. Not the flat, distracted way he'd been saying it lately. Warm, almost playful, the way he used to. I walked in and stopped. There was a Peloton bike in the middle of our living room, brand new, still with the setup wrap half peeled off. A large red bow was taped to the handlebar, slightly crooked, like he'd done it himself in a hurry. He was standing next to it with both hands in his pockets, and that wide room-filling smile I hadn't seen in over 2 years.
"Surprise,"
he said. I looked at the bike. I looked at him. "Damon, what did you do?"
"You work so hard, baby,"
he said, walking over and putting both hands on my shoulders.
"You're always tired, always stressed. This is for your health. I want you to feel good."
I genuinely did not know what to say. I stood there in my kitchen socks and my old Spellman sweatshirt, and I felt, I am embarrassed to admit this, now I felt seen. Like he had noticed something real about me and decided to do something about it. I put my arms around him and held on for a moment longer than I needed to. I should have asked how he paid for it. I should have checked the account that same morning. I should have done a lot of things. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I was just a woman who wanted to believe her husband still loved her. The bike came with a 1-year premium membership already activated. The setup was seamless, screen shoes, everything. Within 3 days, I had a schedule 6:15 every weekday morning before the kids woke up, before the work emails started piling in. Damon even made a point of telling his mother about it when she called that weekend.
"I got Renee one of those Peloton bikes,"
I heard him say from the hallway.
"She needed it."
There was something in the way he said those last 3 words. Not cruel exactly, just flat, matter of fact, like a problem he had addressed. I told myself I was reading into it. The app assigned me to a live class series, and that's how I met Jade Emerson. 29, based out of Brooklyn, with natural hair, a gap-toothed smile, and the kind of high-energy encouragement that made you feel like she was talking directly and only to you. She was good at her job, genuinely good. She remembered usernames. She called people out by name mid-class. She had a gift for making strangers feel known. I liked her immediately. That is the part that still sits in my chest in a complicated way when I think about it. I also noticed about 2 weeks in something small. During a cool-down segment, Jade laughed about receiving flowers from someone special who always knew exactly what she needed. She said it the way women say things when they want to talk about someone but aren't ready to say the name. I smiled at my screen and thought nothing of it. I also noticed that same week that Damon had started coming home late on Wednesday and Friday evenings. He said it was a new commercial project in DeKalb County running behind schedule. I noticed. I filed it away. I did not connect the 2 things. Not yet. But looking back now, the signs were already there. I just wasn't ready to see them. And the one person I never thought to suspect was the woman I was sweating alongside every single morning, counting down reps, trusting her voice to get me through. That week, Damon had 3 of his work friends over for a cookout in the backyard, Marcus Jerome, and a newer guy named Troy. I spent most of Saturday afternoon in that kitchen. Marinated chicken, homemade potato salad, cornbread from scratch. I carried plates out, refilled drinks, kept things moving. At one point, Troy said genuinely, "Man, your wife can cook. This potato salad is no joke."
"She's good in the kitchen. That's about all she's good at."
Damon leaned back in his chair, took a long sip of his drink, and said, easy, casual, like it was nothing. The men went quiet for exactly 1 second. Jerome looked at his plate. Marcus cleared his throat. Troy smiled like he wasn't sure if it was a joke. Damon laughed, big and easy, the room-filling laugh. I was standing 4 feet away, holding an empty serving dish. I walked back into the kitchen. I set the dish in the sink. I stood there for a moment with both hands on the counter and the water running cold over my wrists. I told myself he was just playing around. I told myself it was guy talk. I told myself he didn't mean it. 3 weeks later, my phone rang, and everything I had been telling myself collapsed. I want to be fair. I want to tell this story the right way, which means I have to tell you about the good parts too. Because there were good parts, real ones. And if I skip over them, you won't understand why it took me as long as it did to see what was right in front of me. In the early years, Damon was the kind of husband I used to describe to my girlfriends and watch their eyes go a little soft with envy. Not because he was perfect, he wasn't, but because he was present. On Sunday mornings, he'd make pancakes for Devin and Camille while I slept in, and I'd come downstairs to the sound of cartoons and the smell of butter in a hot pan and think, this is enough. This is more than enough. He used to slow dance with me in the kitchen after the kids went to bed. No music, just swaying, laughing at nothing. He knew when I was overwhelmed before I said a word. He'd just come up behind me while I was at my desk and put both hands on my shoulders and stand there until I exhaled. Those weren't performances. I know the difference now between a man who performs affection and a man who actually feels it. Back then, he felt it, or at least some version of him did. That's the part that's hardest to reconcile. The man who made pancakes on Sunday mornings and the man who stood in my backyard and said she's good in the kitchen, that's about all she's good at. Those two men share the same body, the same laugh, the same hands that used to hold mine at Devin's first flag football game. I don't know exactly when the first man disappeared, but I know the second one had been there a long time before I let myself acknowledge it. By the time the Peloton arrived, I had been quietly absorbing small cruelties for at least 2 years. Not screaming fights, nothing dramatic enough to point to and say, this is abuse, this is wrong, this is the line. Just erosion, the kind that happens so slowly you don't notice your foundation shifting until one morning you reach for solid ground and find sand. He stopped coming to my work events.
Those things are boring, Renee. You know I don't do corporate.
He said it in front of my colleague Angela at my company's holiday dinner. She pretended she hadn't heard. I pretended I didn't care. He started making comments about my appearance that were framed as jokes, but landed like something else entirely. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror one evening, I mentioned I felt tired.
You should try that face mask Mama gave you. You're starting to look it.
Then he walked out. I stood there for a long time looking at my own face. The Peloton I understand now was never entirely about love. It was about optics, about Damon being able to say to his mother, to his boys, to anyone who might be watching, I take care of my wife. The gift was real. The motive behind it was not what I thought, but I didn't know that yet. So I kept writing. Jade's 6:15 class became the best part of my morning. Genuinely, there is something about having a consistent ritual, something that is entirely yours before the emails and the kids' permission slips and the demands of the day that starts to feel like an act of self-preservation, even when you don't realize that's what it is. I looked forward to it. I would set out my shoes the night before. I started sleeping better. I lost 7 pounds in 6 weeks and felt stronger than I had in years. Damon noticed. One morning, he looked me up and down in the kitchen and said,
"See, I told you that bike was a good idea."
Like he'd solved me. Like I was a project that was finally coming along. I smiled. "You were right," I said. I was still trying. Then came the Wednesday evening in mid-March. Damon texted at 4 p.m. running late Gwinnett project. "Don't wait up." I fed the kids, helped Camille with a book report on Harriet Tubman, got them both to bed, and was watching something on television when his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He'd left it charging. The screen lit up. The name displayed was just the letter J. One letter, no last name. No emoji, just J. The preview showed 2 words before the screen went dark, "Miss you." I sat very still for a moment. The television kept going in the other room. The refrigerator hummed. Everything was completely normal and completely wrong at the same time. I told myself he has a colleague named Jerome, a contractor named James he'd mentioned once, his gym buddy from 3 years ago whose name I could not remember but might start with J. There were explanations. There were always explanations. I put his phone face down on the counter and went to bed. He came home at 11:47. I know because I was still awake staring at the ceiling counting the minutes. He smelled like he'd recently showered at a gym, that particular combination of soap and dried sweat that doesn't quite match someone who just came from a job site. He got into bed without checking on the kids. He was asleep in 4 minutes. I lay next to him in the dark and thought about the letter J. I said nothing. Not that night. But something had shifted quiet and permanent somewhere behind my sternum. The following Saturday, Damon's mother, Patricia, drove up from her place in Morrow for Sunday dinner. Patricia Caldwell was a small, immaculately dressed woman who had strong opinions about everything and delivered them in a voice like warm honey sweet on the surface, with an edge underneath that you didn't always catch until later. She complimented the food. She played with Camille's hair. And then while Damon was outside with Devin, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said something that didn't register fully until days later. "You look good, Renee. That bike is doing something for you." She tilted her head, studying me. "Damon always did know how to make a woman feel taken care of. That's how I raised him. A man who provides even when things aren't perfect between two people, that's a good man. Even when things aren't perfect between two people." I looked at her. She held my gaze for exactly a beat too long. Then she picked up her sweet tea and changed the subject to Devin's grades. I replayed that sentence for 3 days. And then, on a Thursday morning, right in the middle of Jade's 6:15 class, sweat on my face, resistance on level 14 trying to keep pace, Jade laughed during a recovery segment and said,
"Okay, I have to say somebody sent me the most beautiful arrangement to the studio this week. Red roses, 24. He knows me so well."
She pressed both hands to her chest and shook her head, still smiling.
"I don't know what I did to deserve that man."
I slowed my pedaling without realizing it. Red roses. 24. Damon had come home late the previous Tuesday. He'd said he stopped to grab dinner. The credit card statement I reviewed every month as a habit, because I am an accountant, because numbers are how I pay attention, showed a charge at a florist in Buckhead. $31.40. I had assumed it was for Patricia's birthday. Her birthday was in November. This was March. I got off the bike. I sat down on the floor of my living room in my workout clothes, and I stayed there for a long time, very still, while the Peloton screen cycled back to its home screen and Jade's smiling profile photo looked out at me like it always had. Like nothing was wrong. Like she had no idea. But the worst was still coming. And I wasn't even close to the bottom yet. I am a woman who works with numbers for a living. I know what it means when the figures don't add up. I know the particular discomfort of sitting with a discrepancy, that low, persistent hum in the back of your mind that says something here is not right, and you already know it. And the only question is whether you're going to look. In 11 years of accounting, I have never once talked myself out of looking. Not once. But in 14 years of marriage, I had talked myself out of looking more times than I can count. That morning, on the floor of my living room in my damp workout clothes, staring at a Peloton screen that had gone dark, I made a decision. Quietly. Without drama. The way I make most of my real decisions. I was going to look. I started where I always start the numbers. That evening, after Devin and Camille were in bed and Damon was watching a game in the den, I sat at the small desk in our bedroom with my laptop and pulled up our household accounts. I do this every month. Damon has always known I do this. He has never cared, or so I thought. Because for 11 years, the accounts told a boring and consistent story. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, car note, Devin's football fees, Camille's dance class, the occasional dinner out. This time I looked closer. The florist charge in Buckhead, $31.40 on March 11th. Billed to our joint visa. I pulled up the previous 2 months. January, a dinner charge at a restaurant called Canoe, $87 on a Wednesday night. Damon had told me that Wednesday he ate at the site with the crew. February, a charge at a hotel in Midtown, the kind of rate that means a room for a night, not a conference. $162. He had told me that weekend he was helping his cousin Marcus move apartments. 3 lies. In 60 days. All paid for with our shared money. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I would have expected them to shake. Instead, there was just this cold clarity, like the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees and my body had adjusted without being asked. I opened a new document and started a list. Dates. Amounts. What he said. What the statement showed. Column A, column B. The gap between them. I am an accountant. This is what I do. The next morning, I did something I had never done before in 14 years of marriage. I waited until Damon left for work, then I picked up his phone. He'd left it on the nightstand, which itself should have told me something, because he'd been taking it everywhere for months, and I looked. He hadn't locked it. That was either arrogance or carelessness. With Damon, it was hard to tell which. The thread with Jay had 43 messages going back to early January. I did not read all of them. I read enough. Can't wait to see you Wednesday. Heart emoji. A photo of flowers on a studio floor, the same red roses Jade had mentioned on screen. You always know exactly what I need. And near the top of the thread, most recent. I told her it was for work. She believed it. She always does. She always does. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. Screen down. Angled the same way. I went to the bathroom, turned on the shower, sat down on the edge of the tub, fully clothed, and pressed both hands flat against my knees. The water ran hot and the mirror fogged over, and I sat there breathing until I could feel my feet again. Then I called Simone. Simone Banks has been my best friend since our sophomore year at Spelman. She is now a family law attorney with her own practice on Cascade Road, and she has the kind of voice that stays level in every situation, the voice of someone who has heard terrible things for a living and learned that falling apart in front of her clients doesn't help anyone. When I told her what I had found, she was quiet for 4 full seconds.
Renee, don't touch anything else. Don't move money. Don't confront him. Call me when you can talk without him hearing you.
Okay, I said.
And Renee.
A pause.
I'm sorry.
Those 2 words cracked something open in me that I had been holding shut all morning. I pressed my hand over my mouth. I gave myself 45 seconds. Then I stopped. I had children to get to school. That evening, I did something I still second-guess. I confronted him. Not the full confrontation. I hadn't spoken to Simone properly, yet hadn't built anything solid. But I had been sitting across from this man at the dinner table for 3 hours watching him eat the food I cooked and help Devin with long division homework, like everything was ordinary. And something in me simply could not hold the silence 1 more minute. I waited until the kids were upstairs. I set my glass down on the kitchen counter. I said very calmly, "Damon, who is Jay?" He looked up from his phone. Something moved behind his eyes fast, like a shutter closing. Then his face did the thing I had seen it do 100 times. It settled into calm. Practiced calm. The kind that isn't actually calm at all, but knows how to wear the expression.
What are you talking about?
He said. The contact in your phone, just the letter J. I saw it light up weeks ago. I want to know who it is. He set his phone face down on the table. Slowly. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said,
Renee, are you serious right now?
Yes, I said. I am. He exhaled through his nose, leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and then he said it in that voice, the patient, slightly tired voice of a man explaining something obvious to someone who should know better.
You're imagining things. You know that, right? There are like 6 people in my phone whose names start with J. Jerome, James. My site manager's name is Justin. You're sitting here working yourself up over a letter.
He paused.
This is what I mean, Renee. This is exactly what I mean. I do something nice for you. I buy you something I try, and instead of appreciating it, you turn it into this.
He gestured vaguely at the space between us.
Look at you. This is why I can't come to you with anything. You fall apart over everything.
I felt the words land. That particular combination, the dismissal, the redirect, the implication that my instincts were a character flaw, I had felt it before. Not this clearly, but I had felt it. I'm not falling apart, I said. I'm asking a question.
And I answered it.
He picked his phone back up.
I'm tired, Renee. I've been on a site since 6 in the morning. Can we not do this tonight?
He went to the den. The game came on. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. I thought about the hotel charge, the florist, the 43 messages. She always does. Then I thought about what Simone had said. Don't confront him yet. Build something solid first. I had moved too fast. I had shown him my hand before I had anything to play. I would not make that mistake again. I picked up my phone and texted Simone. Tomorrow, lunch. I need to tell you everything. Her response came back in under a minute.
I'll clear my calendar.
I put my phone in my pocket, turned off the kitchen light, and walked upstairs to check on my children. Devin was already asleep, one arm hanging off the mattress, Lego pieces scattered across his floor like a tiny explosion. Camille was still reading glasses pushed up on her nose, looking so much like me at that age that my chest ached. "Lights out in 10 minutes, baby," I said.
Okay, Mama, she said without looking up.
I stood in her doorway for a moment longer than I needed to, looking at her, thinking about the accounts, thinking about what I hadn't yet found. I didn't know standing there in that hallway that the worst discovery was still waiting for me, that the lie I had found was only the surface of something much deeper, much colder, and much more deliberate than I had imagined. But I was getting closer, and this time I wasn't going to stop. Simone listened to everything without interrupting. We were at a small Ethiopian place on Cascade Road that she'd been going to for years, corner table backs to the wall, the kind of spot where nobody pays attention to anyone else's conversation. I laid it all out. The florist charge, the hotel, the 43 messages, the way he'd looked at me when I asked about Jay, the way he'd made my question feel like a symptom of something wrong with me rather than a response to something wrong with him. When I finished, Simone put down her fork, laced her fingers together on the table, and said,
How long have you been doing the household accounting?
11 years, I said.
And in 11 years, have your instincts about a discrepancy ever been wrong?
I thought about it honestly. No, I said.
Then stop treating this one like it might be.
She looked at me steadily.
Renee, what you're describing isn't a misunderstanding. It's a pattern. And patterns don't lie.
She reached across the table and tapped the back of my hand once.
I need you to do something for me. Don't confront him again. Don't let him know you're still looking. Go home, act normal, and start documenting everything. Every charge. Every late night. Every inconsistency. Date, time, amount, what he said. You already know how to build a case. You've been doing it for 11 years.
She was right. I knew she was right. I drove home that afternoon with something different sitting in my chest. Not peace, exactly. More like purpose. The specific calm that comes when you stop hoping you're wrong and start preparing for the fact that you're right. I acted normal. I made dinner. I helped with homework. I asked Damon about his day and listened to his answer with my full face, the way I always had, giving him nothing. He seemed almost relaxed that week. Whatever the confrontation in the kitchen had done, it appeared to have convinced him that I had backed down, that I had accepted his version of events and filed it away and moved on like I always did. She always does. He had no idea that I was watching every single thing he did. The second week of April, I found the second piece. I'd been auditing our joint credit card statements going back 14 months, methodical, the way I do everything, when I found a recurring charge I had never seen before. $49 a month billed every 4th of the month to a company called FitConnect Premium Partners. It had been running for 8 months. I had glanced past it before buried between the streaming subscriptions and the gym membership close enough to look like the same category of thing. I looked it up. FitConnect Premium Partners was the parent billing company for Peloton's upgraded membership tier. The one that included access to private instructor sessions, direct scheduled one-on-one video training. Not the standard live classes. Private sessions. The membership was billed under a secondary user profile. Not mine. The email associated with it was an address I didn't recognize, a Gmail account with a combination of letters and numbers that meant nothing to me. But the billing address was our house on Wisteria Lane in Decatur. My husband had set up a second profile on my Peloton membership, a profile connected to an email address I had never seen, and he had been paying for it with our money for 8 months. I sat at my desk for a long time with that information. The bike wasn't just a gift. It was a portal, a way to keep 2 worlds running on the same account, the same card, the same address hidden in plain sight inside something he had given me as an act of love. I screenshot everything. I forwarded it to a folder I had created in a separate email account Simone had advised me to open, one Damon had no access to, no knowledge of, no way to find. Then I closed my laptop and went to the kitchen and stood at the window and looked at the magnolia tree in the backyard for a long time. That was also the week Patricia called. She called on a Tuesday evening, which wasn't unusual. She called every week or so, always with the warmth of a woman who had decided years ago that being charming was more efficient than being honest. She asked about Devon's flag football. She asked about Camille's reading level. She told me she'd made a sweet potato pie and would bring one over on Sunday. And then after a pause, she said, "You know, Renee, I've been thinking about you lately. About how much pressure you're under. Working so hard running that house, raising those babies." "I manage," I said. "You do. You really do." Another pause, the careful kind. "I just think, and I say this because I love you like my own sometimes. We as women, we hold on so tight to what we expect from a marriage that we don't leave room for a man to just be human. You understand what I'm saying?" I kept my voice completely even. "Tell me what you mean, Patricia." "I mean that Damon is a good man. A provider. He loves his children. He loves you in his way." She let that phrase, "in his way," sit there between us like she'd set something down on a table and was waiting to see if I'd pick it up. Sometimes a man gets a little distracted. It doesn't mean what women always want to make it mean. It passes. If a woman is patient, if she's secure, these things pass. The room was very quiet. "How long have you known?" I asked. The silence on her end lasted exactly 3 seconds, long enough to be an answer. "I don't know what you're talking about." Her voice had gone smooth in the way voices go smooth when they've decided on a story. "Patricia." I kept my tone neutral. Flat. The tone I use when I find a discrepancy in a vendor invoice and I want the vendor to know I've found it before I say exactly what it is. "How long?" She exhaled, and then she said low and deliberate, "Jade is a sweet girl. Young. She makes him happy in ways that, Renee, I'm not saying what he's doing is right. And I'm saying that your job right now is to be a wife. To be the kind of woman your husband comes home to. And not every battle is worth fighting." I pressed my thumbnail into my palm hard enough to feel it. "Thank you for calling Patricia," I said. "I'll see you Sunday." I hung up. I sat down. I opened my separate email account and typed out everything she had said word for word with a timestamp, the way Simone had told me to document everything. Then I went upstairs, checked on my children, and came back down and stood in the living room in front of the Peloton. I looked at it for a long time. The screen was dark. My reflection looked back at me, distorted slightly in the black glass. That night, Damon came home at 10:43. He kissed me on the cheek in the kitchen and said he was exhausted and going straight to bed. I told him okay. I watched him walk down the hallway. The following morning at 6:15, I got on the bike. I rode the full 45 minutes. I kept my face neutral and my cadence steady, and I watched Jade smile at me through the screen, warm, encouraging, completely unaware. And I thought, she doesn't know. She genuinely doesn't know. That thought didn't make me feel better. It made everything more complicated and more sad. And somehow, in a way I couldn't fully explain yet, more clear. Because Jade wasn't the enemy. She was just the other person he was lying to. And I was about to find out just how deep those lies went. What I discovered 3 days later made everything before it feel like a minor inconvenience. It was a Thursday night in late April. Damon was watching something in the den. Devon was asleep. Camille had asked for a glass of water 20 minutes ago and had been quiet since, which meant she was also asleep. The house had that particular stillness it gets after 10 at night, the kind where you can hear the refrigerator from 2 rooms away and the creak of the house settling into itself. I was at my desk in the bedroom. I had been working my way through our financial accounts the way I work through anything that doesn't add up slowly, methodically from the outside in. Checking statements. Tracing transfers, building the full picture before I let myself have a reaction to any individual piece of it. That is how I am built. That is the discipline that 11 years of accounting gives you. You do not panic at the first number that looks wrong. You follow it. That night, I followed it somewhere I was not prepared to go. I had been reviewing a secondary savings account, one we had opened 8 years ago, shortly after Devon was born. A children's education fund. The plan was simple. I would transfer $250 every single month automatically from my direct deposit into that account. Just that. Just consistent, quiet, unremarkable deposits month after month, year after year. I had never touched it. I had barely even looked at it because looking at it meant thinking about how slowly it was growing and how far away college still felt, and it was easier to just let it accumulate and trust the math. I pulled it up. The balance was $4,312. I sat very still. I pulled up the transaction history. My hands were moving on the keyboard before my brain had fully caught up with what I was seeing. The deposits were their regular, consistent $250 every month, going back 8 years the way I had set them up. 250 inches, 250 inches, 250 inches. And then starting 14 months ago, withdrawals. Not one large withdrawal that might have looked like an emergency. Not something that might have been a mistake or a misunderstanding. Withdrawals. Plural. Small enough each one to avoid triggering the account alert threshold I had set years ago and then forgotten about. 300 here. 500 there. 450. 275. Spaced out across 14 months, irregular enough to look like noise if you were only glancing, systematic enough to be deliberate if you were actually looking. I added them up. $80,688. Gone. I pushed back from the desk. I stood up. I sat back down. I stood up again. I walked to the window and stood there with my forehead almost touching the glass, looking out at the backyard at the magnolia tree that was dark and still in the April night, and I breathed. In, out, in, out. The way my mother taught me when I was small and overwhelmed Renee when everything is too big, you just breathe until it gets smaller. It did not get smaller. 8 years. 8 years of $250 a month every month. No exceptions. Money I had quietly pulled from my own paycheck before it hit our joint account. Money I had never spent on myself, never mentioned in arguments about finances, never used as leverage. Money I had set aside with the specific singular intention of making sure my children would have choices. That Devin and Camille would never have to choose a school based on what they could afford rather than where they deserved to be. Damon was the joint account holder. I had added him when Devin was born because the bank required a second adult on children's custodial savings accounts, and I had trusted him, and it had never occurred to me not once in 8 years that he would touch it. Not once. I traced the withdrawals to a transfer account I didn't recognize, a checking account in Damon's name alone. I couldn't see where the money went from there. I didn't have access, but I didn't need to. I had the florist charge. I had the hotel. I had the private Peloton sessions. I had 43 messages and a credit card trail spanning 14 months. I knew where the money went. She makes him happy. He needed something for himself. Be patient. Be a better wife. I sat back down at my desk. I opened my separate email account. I started typing. Everything. Every withdrawal. Every date. Every amount. The account numbers. The transfer records. I attached screenshots. I typed until my fingers ached and then I kept typing. Then I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark of my bedroom for a long time. The door opened. Damon came in, already pulling his shirt off, moving through the room with the easy physical confidence of a man who has never once felt unwelcome in his own home. He didn't look at me. He went to his dresser. He pulled out a t-shirt.
You're up late.
He said. I was working, I said.
You work too much.
He said it almost fondly, like it was an endearing quirk, like I was a woman with a small, harmless habit. Something in me broke open and went cold at the same time. Damon, I said, I need to talk to you. He turned. He looked at my face. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of calculation fast and practiced before the calm came back down.
What's wrong?
The children's education account, I said. I looked at it tonight. The calm stayed on his face. It stayed there so completely and so deliberately that it told me everything. Innocent men don't produce that kind of stillness. That stillness takes practice.
Okay,
He said slowly. $80,688, I said. In 14 months. Where did it go, Damon? He looked at me for a long moment. And then, and I will never forget this, as long as I live, he sat down on the edge of the bed, put his elbows on his knees, and said,
I needed it.
Not I can explain. Not there's been a mistake. Not even a denial. I needed it. You needed it, I repeated.
Things have been tight. There were expenses. I was going to replace it.
$80,000.
Renee.
You took $80,000 from our children's college fund. My voice was steady. I don't know how. Money I saved, dollar by dollar for 8 years. You took it and you spent it on... I stopped. I looked at him. On her. He stood up. And just like that, the practiced calm cracked, but not into remorse. Into something harder. Something that had been waiting underneath the calm all along, coiled and ready.
You want to do this? Fine. You want to talk about where money goes in this house? Let's talk about your spa days. Your girls' trips. The money you spend on Devin's football gear like he's going to the NFL.
Do not, I said.
I provided for this family for 14 years.
I make $68,000 a year more than you do, Damon. Don't. That landed. I watched it land. His jaw tightened.
You always want to throw that in my face.
He said.
You think because you make more money, you get to run everything. Control everything. Maybe if you weren't so focused on being the one in charge all the time, I wouldn't have needed to look somewhere else.
He took a step toward the door.
You drove me to this, Renee. You need to ask yourself what you did to make me feel like I had no other choice.
He walked out. I heard his footsteps go down the hall. The den door closed. I sat in the bedroom with the light on and the sound of the refrigerator humming from 2 rooms away, and I thought about Devin at 11 years old taking apart machines to see how they worked. I thought about Camille at 9 already correcting my grammar. I thought about what I had just built for them and what he had just taken. Something inside me went very quiet. Not sad quiet, dangerous quiet. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the bed we had shared for 12 years on my side, facing the window, listening to him breathe on the other side of a space that felt suddenly vast and foreign, and I made a decision that I want to describe accurately, because it was not the dramatic movie-style moment where a woman sits up in bed with fire in her eyes and declares war. It was quieter than that, more cellular, like something deep in the architecture of who I am simply realigned. I had spent 14 years being a woman who believed that patience was the same thing as strength. That staying was the same thing as loving. That absorbing the slow erosion of your own dignity was the same thing as keeping a family together. I was done confusing those things. By 5 a.m, I had not slept, and I was not going to sleep. I got up, dressed quietly, went downstairs, and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. I wrote down everything. Not for Simone yet, just for myself. The full timeline. Every lie I could document. Every withdrawal. Every charge. Everything he had said, and when he had said it, and who had been in the room. I wrote for 2 hours. 12 pages. When Devin came downstairs at 7:15 looking for cereal, I was on my 3rd cup of coffee and my face was composed. I helped him find the Honey Nut Cheerios. I asked him if he had gym today.
Yes, he said.
And I said, make sure you bring your sneakers.
Okay, Mama, he said.
He wandered back upstairs. None of that was a performance. Those were just the facts of loving a child the way love is mostly made of small, consistent, ordinary things that continue even when everything else is on fire. Damon came down at 7:45. He poured coffee. He did not look at me.
I'll be home late.
He left. I called Simone at 8:01. She arrived at my house at noon straight from a court appearance, still in her navy blazer with a leather portfolio under her arm. I had Devin at school and Camille at an after-school program until 5, which gave us 5 hours. I put the legal pad on the kitchen table. I opened my laptop to the accounts. I laid out every single piece of what I had found. Simone read. She cross-referenced. She made notes in her portfolio with a precision that I found deeply comforting, the focus of someone who has shifted from friend into professional without losing the first thing. When she finished, she looked up at me with an expression I recognized. It was the expression she wore in law school when she had found the exact argument she needed, and she knew it was airtight.
Renee, she said, he didn't just betray your marriage. What he did to those accounts withdrawing from a custodial savings fund established for minor children, that is financial misconduct. In Georgia, that has weight in family court. Significant weight.
She tapped her pen on the table.
And combined with the pattern of deception, the documentation, you have the timeline, we are not looking at a standard divorce proceeding. We are looking at a case where the court is going to look very unfavorably at him. Very.
What do I do first? I said.
You do nothing that lets him know you're moving. You keep acting normal. You stop accessing the children's account so there's no flag. You let me file the preliminary paperwork. And in the meantime, you build the evidence file, everything you showed me today, organized and time-stamped.
She paused.
And there's one more thing.
What?
The instructor, Jade.
She looked at me carefully.
Do you have any direct evidence connecting her to your husband? Something she said? Something documented?
I told her about the private session profile, the billing address, the secondary account on the membership. Simone was quiet for a moment.
I need you to think about something. If this woman genuinely did not know he was married, and I mean genuinely, she may be one of your most useful witnesses. Not as an enemy, as someone who was also deceived.
I sat with that for a long time. The following morning, Jade called. I had not given her my number, but the premium membership tier included a direct contact option between users and instructors for scheduling. She had my number through the platform. She called at 8:47 after my morning class had ended. I was still on the bike cool-down stretching when my phone lit up on the handlebar mount with her name. I answered. There was a pause on her end.
Renee.
Her voice was different from the bright, high-energy voice I heard through the screen every morning. Smaller. Like she wasn't sure she had the right to be making this call. Yes, I said.
I'm sorry to contact you like this. I know this is so far outside of normal, and I almost didn't call, but
She stopped, took a breath.
I saw a photo on a Facebook post from someone we both apparently know. A family photo. You and your husband and your kids. And I recognized your last name from the membership, and
Another stop.
I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to tell me the truth.
Ask it, I said.
Is your husband's name Damon Caldwell?
The way she said it. Not a question. An unraveling. Yes, I said. The silence on her end lasted 6 full seconds. I counted them.
I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. He told me he was separated. That you were, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I feel sick.
I believed her. I believed her not because I was naive, but because I am a person who has spent 11 years reading numbers. I know when something doesn't add up, and I know when something does. The shame in her voice was real. The shock was real. I believe you, I said. She exhaled like I had set her down from a height. We talked for 22 minutes. She told me everything when they had met, what he had said, the version of his life he had presented to her. He had told her we were separated and working through a custody arrangement. He had told her I had moved out of the house 6 months ago. He had told her he was staying in the house for the sake of the children. Everything a smooth, practiced liar tells a woman he wants to keep close. By the end of the conversation, Jade had said she would cooperate with anything I needed. Her voice was flat with the particular flatness of a woman who has just had to reorganize her entire understanding of the last several months of her life.
He made me feel like I was special, she said.
Not to me exactly. More to herself. You were just a secret, I said. Not cruelly, just accurately. She was quiet.
What are you going to do?
Everything I said. That same afternoon, Damon came home at 4 earlier than expected. I was in the kitchen when he walked in. He dropped his keys on the counter. He looked at me for a moment with that assessing look I had learned to recognize checking the temperature of the room reading whether I was still contained.
You good?
I'm fine, I said. He nodded, satisfied. He opened the refrigerator. What happened next I have replayed many times. I don't know what loosened in him in that moment. Whether it was the fact that I had been quiet since the confrontation, whether he had decided my silence meant surrender, whether the arrogance had simply built past the point where he could contain it. But he turned from the refrigerator with a water bottle in his hand. He looked at me standing at the counter, and he said,
I've been thinking. You need to drop this whole thing, Renee. Whatever you're cooking up in that head of yours.
He pointed the water bottle at me, a lazy, almost bored gesture.
You don't have the stomach for a fight. You never did. You'll spend 6 months making yourself miserable, and then you'll do what you always do. You'll hold it together for the kids and move on. Because that's who you are.
I looked at him. I thought about 12 pages of notes. I thought about Simone's navy blazer and her open portfolio. I thought about Jade's voice saying, "I swear to God I didn't know." I thought about Devin and Camille and $80,688. I smiled. Small. Easy. "You're probably right," I said. He nodded. Took a drink of his water. Walked to the den. I stood in the kitchen and listened to the television come on. And I thought, enjoy these next few weeks, Damon. Enjoy every single one of them. Because I had already made the call that was going to change everything. The first thing Simone did was hire a forensic accountant. His name was Gerald Okafor, a quiet, meticulous man out of a firm on Peachtree Street who specialized in exactly this kind of work. Tracing money through transfers, shell accounts, family LLCs, and the kind of financial maneuvering that looks complicated until someone who knows what they're looking at sits down with the full picture. Simone had used him in 3 previous cases. She said he had never once failed to find the full trail. He found it in 11 days. Damon had not simply been withdrawing money from the children's education account. He had been routing it through a personal checking account, then transferring portions into a limited liability company registered in the state of Georgia. A small contracting entity called D&P Building Solutions. D for Damon, P for Patricia. The company was registered under Patricia Caldwell's name. I read that line 3 times. Patricia, who had called me to say, "Be patient, be a better wife, these things pass," had her name on a business entity that her son had used to move money out of his own children's college fund. Whether she knew exactly what was flowing through it, or whether Damon had simply used her name as a legal shield without her full understanding, was something the court would have to determine. But her name was on it, notarized, filed with the Georgia Secretary of State. Gerald laid out the full trail in a 23-page report with transaction records attached. Simone read every page. So did I.
This is everything we need, Simone said.
She set the report down on her desk and looked at me.
And then some.
I nodded.
The divorce filing goes in tomorrow. I'm including a motion to freeze all joint financial accounts pending the hearing, and a separate motion citing misappropriation of minor children's assets. That second motion is the one that changes his entire position in this case. Judges in DeKalb County do not look kindly at that. At all.
What about Patricia?
She's named as a secondary respondent in connection with the LLC. Her attorney will tell her to cooperate.
Simone allowed herself a small, precise smile.
She's going to have a very unpleasant few weeks.
I thought about the sweet potato pie she had promised to bring on Sunday. I thought about be patient, these things pass. I thought about a woman who had sat at my kitchen table and eaten my food for 12 years and known the whole time. Good, I said. The divorce papers were served to Damon on a Thursday morning. I arranged it deliberately. I was at work when the process server went to the house, so I did not have to watch his face when he opened the envelope. I did not trust myself to stay composed if I watched his face. He called me 4 times before noon. I let every call go to voicemail. At 12:30, he appeared at Meridian Logistics. He was waiting in the lobby when I came out for lunch, and the sight of him standing there still in his work clothes, jaw-tied eyes doing the thing where the calm was completely gone, told me the papers had landed exactly the way Simone said they would. Outside, I said quietly, "Not a question." We stood on the sidewalk on Peachtree Road. It was a warm Thursday in May. Lunch traffic moving around us. People passing with to-go containers and iced coffees. Nobody paying attention to a man and a woman having the conversation that ends a marriage.
You filed, he said.
I did.
Without talking to me.
You talked enough, I said. I listened enough. His eyes went hard.
You think this is smart? You think taking me to court is going to go the way you're planning? I know people, Renee. I know how this works. You're going to spend everything you've saved on legal fees. And at the end of it, you'll get half of nothing. because I don't have anything in my name worth taking.
I looked at him steadily. I thought about Gerald Okafor's 23-page report. I thought about D&P Building Solutions registered in the state of Georgia, Patricia Caldwell listed as owner.
Nobody wants a woman who cries over spreadsheets, he said.
Lower now, leaning in slightly, the voice he used when he wanted to make something land.
You really think a judge is going to sit there and feel sorry for you? You make good money, Renee. You're fine. You've always been fine. You don't need anything from me.
I let him finish. Then I said, "Okay, Damon." I turned and walked back into the building. Behind me, I heard him say something else, sharp frustrated. But I was already through the glass doors and the words didn't reach me, and I did not turn around. Back at my desk, I sat down. I opened my laptop, and I sent Simone a single text. He showed up at my office. I recorded it. Her response came back in 40 seconds.
Perfect. See you Friday.
That evening, I told Devin and Camille that their dad and I were going to be living separately for a while. I had practiced the words with a child therapist Simone had recommended, a woman named Dr. Yvette Marshall, who specialized in helping parents have exactly this conversation. I sat on the living room floor with both of them, cross-legged, and I told them that this was not their fault, that both their parents loved them without condition, and that some things between adults are complicated in ways that have nothing to do with children. Devin was quiet for a long moment.
Are we staying in this house?
Yes, baby, I said. You're staying in this house. Camille said nothing. She climbed into my lap, which she hadn't done in 2 years. She put both arms around my neck and held on. I pressed my face into her hair and breathed. In, out. The way my mother taught me when I was small and the world felt too large. I held her back. That night, after they were asleep, I stood in the living room and looked at the Peloton. It stood where it had always stood. Same spot, same dark screen. Same red handlebar I had gripped through 45 minutes of effort every single morning for 2 months, while the woman on the other side of the screen had no idea she was looking at the wife of the man she was falling for. I thought about what it had cost. Not the bike. Everything around it. I thought about Friday's hearing. I smiled at nothing in particular and went to bed. Damon had no idea that by the time he walked into that conference room on Friday afternoon, I would already be holding every single card in the deck, and he had handed most of them to me himself. The hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning in June at the DeKalb County Courthouse on Memorial Drive. I arrived at 8:45 with Simone. Charcoal gray dress, hair pulled back. The look of a woman who has organized her evidence the way she organizes everything else in her life. Simone carried the leather portfolio. Gerald Okafor's 23-page forensic report was inside it, tabbed and annotated. Jade was already there when we arrived, sitting on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, hands folded in her lap. She stood when she saw me. "Thank you for coming," I said.
I should have figured it out sooner. I'm sorry I didn't.
I nodded once. That was enough. Damon arrived at 9:05 with his attorney Howard Briggs, known for aggressive tactics in low-asset cases. Dark suit, freshly pressed, shoes polished. He looked controlled. He saw me in the hallway and held my gaze with the steady confidence of a man who had convinced himself he still held the upper hand. Patricia arrived 2 minutes behind him. She walked past me without a word. We filed in. The judge was the Honorable Constance Whitfield. Sharp eyes. The particular patience of someone who has heard every variation of human deception and stopped being surprised by any of it. Briggs went first. Limited marital assets. No significant holdings in Damon's name. A hard-working husband. The LLC described as a legitimate small business. Patricia as a supportive family member. He was smooth and practiced. Damon sat with his hands folded and the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth, the smile of a man who thinks he has already won. Then he turned and looked directly at me across the courtroom and mouthed 2 words, slowly, deliberately.
"You lose."
I held his gaze. I folded my hands on the table exactly the way his were folded. I said nothing. Simone stood up. She laid out the marriage timeline, the financial history, my salary, the children's education fund. Then she placed Gerald's report on the record.
Your Honor, Simone said, what this forensic analysis documents is a systematic withdrawal of $80,688 from a custodial savings account established for the benefit of 2 minor children. Withdrawn over 14 months in amounts calibrated to stay below the account's alert threshold. Routed through a personal checking account. Then transferred into a limited liability company, D&P Building Solutions, registered under the name of the respondent's mother, Patricia Caldwell, who is present today.
The room went very quiet.
The funds were used, Simone continued, to finance a 17-month extramarital relationship. Hotel stays, restaurant charges, flowers, private fitness sessions billed through the marital address. All documented, all attached as exhibits.
I was watching Damon. The smile was gone. He had gone very still, the stillness of a person whose mind is moving fast while their body tries not to show it. His jaw tightened. His folded hands pressed together until the knuckles shifted color. A thin line of sweat appeared along his hairline. Howard Briggs leaned over and said something urgent in his ear. Damon did not respond.
Judge Whitfield looked over her glasses at his table. Counsel, does your client wish to respond to the forensic findings?
Briggs tried. He used words like disputed, context, informal family financial arrangements. But there is a particular disadvantage that comes with representing a client whose paper trail has been reconstructed by a forensic accountant with 11 days and a full set of transaction records. The numbers were the numbers. The judge let him finish. Then she looked directly at Damon.
Sir, she said, you testified in preliminary filings that your wife manages all household finances. Is that correct?
Damon cleared his throat. Yes, Your Honor.
Then help me understand, Judge Whitfield said, setting the report down in front of her. How $80,688 moved out of your children's education account in 14 months without the involvement of the person who, by your own account, manages all household finances.
The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard in a room full of people. Damon opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The color drained from his face completely and all at once. His hands came apart on the table. One of them trembled visibly. He pressed it flat against the surface, but the trembling continued. Sweat gathered at his temple. His voice, when it finally emerged, was not the voice that had told me nobody wants a woman who cries over spreadsheets. It was not the voice that had mouthed you lose across a courtroom 30 minutes ago. It was cracked, small, unrecognizable.
I can explain.
The record will reflect, Judge Whitfield said without looking up, that the respondent has no coherent explanation for the forensic findings.
Jade took the stand. She confirmed the 17-month relationship, confirmed he had told her we were separated, described the private Peloton sessions booked through our home address. Her voice was steady. Her eyes never once moved toward Damon. When she stepped down, she did not look at him. Not once. Patricia sat rigid in her seat throughout. The woman who had told me these things pass was now on the record as a named party in her son's financial misconduct. She stared at a fixed point above the judge's head and did not speak. The recess was called at 11:15. In the hallway, Damon found me. He came around a corner fast. Something stripped from his face that I had never seen before. Not arrogance, not the practiced calm, but something raw, desperate, small.
Renee, I'll pay it all back. Every dollar. I swear to God. Please don't let them take everything. Think about Devin. Think about Camille.
I looked at him for a long moment. At the face I had loved for 14 years. At the man who had stood in my backyard and said she's good in the kitchen, that's about all she's good at, and laughed like it cost him nothing. You're not sorry, Damon, I said. Quiet, steady. You're just sorry the judge saw those numbers. I walked back into the courtroom. Judge Whitfield's ruling came 40 minutes later.
Full primary custody of Devon and Camille to Renee Caldwell. Complete restitution of $80,688 to the Children's Education Fund. Garnished from Damon's future income if necessary. D&P Building Solutions referred to the Georgia Attorney General's office for review of potential financial misconduct involving a minor children's custodial account. Patricia Caldwell ordered to cooperate fully with that investigation.
Damon sat at the table with both hands flat on the surface and his head slightly down, like a man waiting for something to tell him what to do next. Nothing was coming. I gathered my documents. I put on my jacket. I picked up my bag. I did not look back. 3 months after the hearing, I signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment in Inman Park. 2nd floor. Hardwood floors the color of warm honey. A kitchen with a window above the sink that looked out onto a courtyard where someone had planted rose bushes along the fence line. 900 square feet, less than half the size of the house on Wisteria Lane. It was also from the first morning I woke up in it the most peaceful place I had ever lived. That first morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. I did not check anyone else's schedule. I did not inventory anyone else's needs. I sat in the quiet and I drank my coffee while the light came through the courtyard window. And I thought, this is mine. All of this is mine. The feeling was so unfamiliar, it took me a few minutes to recognize it as ordinary contentment. I had forgotten what that felt like when it wasn't tangled up with someone else's chaos. My younger sister Diane helped me move in. She drove up from Morrow with her truck and her 2 teenagers and did not say I told you so once, which is the most loving thing a sister can do. We ordered pizza at 9 at night and sat on the floor surrounded by boxes. She held my hand for a minute and said, "You look like yourself again." I did not know until she said it how long I had not. Devin helped me assemble the bookshelf. He had opinions about where it should go, which were wrong, and I let him figure that out himself, which took 45 minutes and resulted in the shelf landing exactly where I had suggested in the first place. He is so much like me, it is almost funny. Almost. Camille claimed the window seat in the living room on day 1. She dragged her reading pillow out, announced it was her spot. And that was that. I watched her settle in glasses, pushed up completely at home within 20 minutes. And something in my chest unknotted that had been tight for a very long time. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. That does not mean the transition was easy. There were hard nights. And mornings Devin came to breakfast quiet in a way that told me he was carrying something he wasn't ready to say out loud. I did not push. I sat with him. I made the Honey Nut Cheerios. I stayed present. That is all any of us can do. And most days it is enough. Simone came for dinner the 3rd week. Wine. Rotisserie chicken. That satisfied expression she gets when something she helped build turns out right.
How are you? She asked.
I thought about it honestly before I answered. Lighter, I said. She understood exactly what I meant. I want to tell you what happened to Damon, because the record should be complete. The garnishment order went into effect the first month after the ruling. 30% of his take-home pay directed automatically into the Restored Education Fund until the full $80,688 was repaid. He moved out of the house on Wisteria Lane within 3 weeks. The house sold. Proceeds split per the court order. He moved in with Patricia temporarily, who was simultaneously managing an inquiry from the Georgia Attorney General's office regarding D&P building solutions. Jade blocked him on every platform the day the hearing ended. She sent me a message that evening.
I blocked him.
I replied with 2. Thank you. We never communicated again. It was enough. The woman who had made him feel chosen and special was simply gone. He was left with the full accounting of everything he had traded. A marriage, his children's trust, his reputation, his mother's name on a state investigation document. All of it, gone. For a man who had stood in my backyard and announced I was only good in the kitchen, I cannot think of a more complete answer. I do not spend much time thinking about him anymore. When you stop centering someone in your own story, they become very small very quickly. What I think about instead, Devin at Saturday flag football still convinced every play is finally going to work. Camille correcting my grammar at dinner, and the way I have stopped pretending to be annoyed. The rose bushes in the courtyard that bloomed in August in the specific red of something that simply refused to stop. I donated the Peloton to a community wellness center in southwest Atlanta, 3 miles from where I grew up. A woman named Brenda shook my hand at the door and said, "This is going to mean a lot to some people." I believed her. I walk in the mornings now, outside, through Inman Park, when the air is still cool and the light comes low through the trees. No screen, no instructor, no one setting my pace. Just me, moving forward at my own speed, on my own terms. In September, I received a promotion at Meridian Logistics, a title I had been passed over for twice while quietly absorbing a marriage that was falling apart. Donna said, "You've been ready for this for a long time." I waited until the parking garage to feel it completely. The grief, the relief, the pride, all at once. None of them in conflict. I think about the woman I was at the beginning of this story, sitting on the floor of her living room in workout clothes, staring at a dark screen, telling herself she was imagining things, talking herself out of her own instincts because she loved someone and wanted so badly for the comfortable version of her life to be real. I want to reach back and take her hand. I want to say, you are not imagining things. You are not too much. You are just in the wrong story. And you have always had the ability to close it and start writing your own. Your instincts are not a character flaw. That voice that says something is wrong is not anxiety or paranoia. It is information. It has always been information. The question is whether you are going to look. A man can give you a bike and call it love. Do not confuse the gift for the feeling. Pay attention to what is underneath. My name is Renee Caldwell. I am 38 years old, and I am the woman who followed the money and found herself. You can too. If this story moved you, if any part of it felt like something you needed to hear today, leave a comment below. Tell me what stayed with you. Tell me your story if you're ready. You are not alone in this, and you are stronger than you know. If this channel has given you something, subscribe and share it with a woman who needs it. We keep each other going. That has always been the point.